The first winter should have killed every human on Earth. No fur, no fire yet, not reliably, no woven cloth, no stitched hide, nothing you would recognize as a coat. Just bare, sweat-covered skin, built by evolution for shedding heat on a blistering savanna, now standing in the one environment that skin was never designed to survive. And yet, here you are, which means somehow, against every reasonable expectation, they made it through. You already know part of this story. You know your ancestors traded their fur for sweat glands, a trade that turned them into the most heat-resilient endurance runners on the African savanna. It was a brilliant adaptation. It was also, the moment winter arrived, a catastrophic liability. Because a body built to release heat has exactly one problem when the temperature drops far enough. It cannot hold heat in. Sweat glands don't reverse. Bare skin doesn't grow fur back on command. The same design that let your ancestors outlast a cheetah in the heat now left them dangerously exposed the instant that heat disappeared. So picture the moment. Humans, or the hominins who came before fully modern humans, pushing north out of Africa for the first time, leaving behind the environment their bodies were built for, walking into landscapes where the temperature could drop below freezing, where snow could fall for days, where the sun barely warmed the air even at midday. Every other cold climate mammal around them came prepared. Thick fur. Layers of insulating fat built specifically for the cold. Instincts for hibernation or migration passed down over millions of years of adaptation to exactly this environment. Your ancestors had none of that. They were tropical animals wandering into an ice age with the equipment of a savanna sprinter. By every reasonable measure, this should have been the end of the story. It wasn't. And the reason it wasn't comes down to 4 overlapping survival strategies, each one filling a gap the others couldn't cover alone. The first, and most important, was fire. You already know fire wasn't invented in a single dramatic moment. It was captured, protected, and gradually mastered over a long stretch of time. But there's a detail in the archaeological record that matters enormously here. The timing of when fire use became habitual, meaning used constantly as an everyday necessity rather than occasionally. Archaeologists Will Roebucks and Paula Vila examined fire evidence across Europe and found something striking. Habitual fire use appears to align closely with the time frame when humans were expanding into colder northern regions. This isn't a coincidence. Fire wasn't just a convenience in these environments. It was the single piece of technology that made survival there possible at all. A controlled flame could turn a freezing night into a survivable one. It could dry wet clothing, warm frozen limbs, and create a radius of livable space in an otherwise lethal environment. Fire solved the most immediate problem, but fire alone wasn't enough. You cannot carry a flame everywhere, and you cannot outrun a snowstorm while huddled around a hearth. Something else was needed to protect the body directly, not just the space around it. That something was clothing. This is where the story connects directly back to a piece of evidence you may already know: body lice. Unlike head lice, body lice can only survive in fabric, which means their genetic history is essentially a timestamp for when clothing first appeared. Geneticist Mark Stoneking's research placed that origin at roughly 170,000 years ago. Look at what that timing means. Clothing appears right around the window when humans were beginning to push into colder, more northern territories. This wasn't a coincidence either. Clothing was the direct answer to the exact problem fur loss created. It gave humans something fur used to provide: a portable, adjustable barrier between bare skin and freezing air. Animal hides, sewn or wrapped, became the substitute for the fur their bodies could no longer grow. Fire warmed the space. Clothing warmed the body. But there was still a third gap. What happens during the hours when neither is fully protecting you? What happens overnight when the fire burns low and clothing alone isn't quite enough? The answer is something almost embarrassingly simple. They slept close together. Group sleeping and close physical clustering around a shared hearth wasn't just social behavior, It was thermoregulation. Multiple bodies pressed together lose heat far more slowly than a single body alone. Evolutionary anthropologists studying early human shelter sites have found consistent evidence of small, tightly clustered sleeping areas centered directly around hearths, suggesting that warmth, not just safety, shaped how early humans organized their living space. This is a detail easy to overlook because it isn't a tool or an invention. It's simply proximity. But proximity in a cold enough environment is a survival strategy in its own right. Fire, clothing, shared body heat. Three overlapping solutions to the same brutal problem. But there's a fourth piece, one that operates on a completely different level, inside the body rather than around it. Fat. Surviving cold isn't just about preventing heat loss, it's about having enough stored energy to keep generating heat internally, night after night, week after week, through a season where food is scarcer and the body burns calories simply trying to stay warm. This is where Richard Wrangham's cooking hypothesis becomes relevant again, in a new context. Cooked food isn't just easier to digest and richer in usable calories in general. It also made it dramatically easier for early humans to build and maintain the fat reserves winter survival demanded. A raw diet, the kind other primates relied on, simply couldn't deliver calories efficiently enough to support this kind of seasonal fat storage. Cooking changed the energy math entirely, and that changed math may have been the quiet difference between populations that made it through a harsh winter and ones that didn't. So here's the full picture, laid out together. Your ancestors arrived in a cold, unforgiving environment with a body that was, in isolation, catastrophically unprepared for it. No fur, no natural insulation, a cooling system with no way to reverse itself. And instead of a single miraculous solution, they survived through four overlapping strategies working together. Fire to warm the space around them, clothing to replace the fur they'd lost, shared body heat to cover the gaps in both, and calorie-dense cooked food to fuel a body working overtime just to stay warm. None of these strategies alone would have been enough. Fire without clothing still leaves you exposed the moment you step away from the flame. Clothing without fire still leaves you cold once night falls hard enough. Shared warmth without enough calories eventually runs out of fuel to generate. It was the overlap, the redundancy, the fact that if one system failed, there were three others compensating, that got your ancestors through winters that should have ended the story of the human species before it really began. The next time you pull on a coat or feel a furnace kick on or notice how much warmer a room feels with more people in it, you're looking at direct descendants of that same survival math. Different tools now, same underlying problem, solved the exact same way it was solved the very first time. Not through a single perfect adaptation, but through humans stacking imperfect solutions on top of each other until, together, they were enough. Your ancestors weren't built for winter. They built their way through it anyway.